Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. So big news, they're wheels up on Punisher Season 1. They have a showrunner that's already working on scripts. They just cast the first villain, so I'm going to do a breakdown of that. But I'm also going to explain Ghost Rider and Blade, two other really big characters that I think we'll eventually see in those series. So the big news is that they've cast one of the big villains of the season, played by Ben Barnes. You may remember him from the Chronicles of Narnia movies, but he's been in a couple other things. But here's the thing, there's a lot of question as to who he's playing because people think that it might be Bobby Saint, who was a character not from the comics that was made up for the 2004 Thomas Jane Punisher movie. So that was the one where John Travolta played the villain. He was a crime boss, Howard Saint. People felt like he was a version of comic book Ma Nucci from like the Welcome Back Frank arc, who was a pretty interesting villain, but the way she ended up dying was so hardcore. I mean, it was Garth Ennis writing, so you expected something really crazy, but she ended up crawling to the Central Park Zoo as the Punisher was tracking her down, got her arms and legs bit off, and her scalp just like raked to shreds. And then it turned into this much bigger mob war. Like the way her character goes down, because she doesn't have any limbs, is by like trying to gnaw on the Punisher's leg. It gets so hardcore. So obviously, when they did the big 2004 movie, they didn't want to do something like this. They're like, we can't do this for mainstream audience. They had not done Iron Man yet. Marvel hadn't blown up. So comic book movies were still in a really weird place. Like they had just done the Ang Lee version of the Hulk. So imagine that's kind of where superhero movies were at that point. They hadn't quite got to X-Men Last Stand level, but let's just say creatively, critically, that was not a good period for comic book films. It wasn't until Iron Man triggered this big resurgence, Christopher Nolan came along and did the Dark Knight trilogy. That was really when like the renaissance of comic book movies came about. So you can understand, like when they did this 2004 Punisher movie, how they wanted to change a bunch of comic book things. But now that we're doing Punisher Netflix, there's none of those concerns. They can be as faithful to hardcore Punisher comic book characters as they want. So what might be happening is Ben Barnes might not be playing the Bobby Saint character. He was like this really minor character. He was the son of John Travolta's character, who was also a made-up character, not from the comics. So it seems a little out of character for the Netflix series that they're getting ready to shoot to pull from like a really bad Punisher movie. Now, I wouldn't say it's like the worst Marvel movie ever, but I'm not a huge fan of Punisher's cinematic outings so far. So just be prepared for him to be somebody different than what everybody thinks. They haven't confirmed who he's been cast as. It's just that people think that he's the Bobby Saint character. So as of right now, the only other character that we know that the Punisher series is going to be doing is the Microchip character, who's kind of like the Oracle, Birds of Prey type character for Punisher. Melvin Potter would probably be a good comparison. He's like a Melvin Potter specific to Punisher's character in the comics, but they eventually end up going against each other, which is funny because Melvin Potter is Gladiator in the comics too. So I'll be interested to see what happens with both those characters. Like at the end of Daredevil Season 2, like Punisher grabbing that Microchip CD makes it seem like he's going to show up pretty soon. Like, oh yeah, we're definitely going to be doing this character. Punisher's going to be tracking some people down. So naturally, the mob is always a big villain in the Punisher comics, so that's what they're going to be doing in the series. So they did the Irish Mafia during Daredevil Season 2. They're probably going to retaliate, but I would expect in the larger context, because the Kingpin controls most of the crime in the city, or he will really soon, he'll come into play down the road too. Like he'll become a larger villain for all the Netflix series eventually. Right now, he's very Daredevil specific. Like Nelson and Murdoch are on his shit list. The Daredevil is on his shit list, and the Punisher is also on his shit list. So eventually he's going to start consolidating power, but we might only be getting an inkling of that when the Punisher series picks up. Because largely, like when each of these characters gets their own first spin-off series, they have their own story, and then later on they weave in the other Netflix characters. So like you'll see other characters cross over on the Punisher, but mostly they're going to be telling a Punisher-specific story. Like it could exist by itself without the other Netflix series, but it will tie in, like it's all connected. So like in about 2 weeks, Luke Cage is going to drop. It'll be the same thing. It'll be very Harlem specific, but because Harlem is part of New York, it's going to connect with the other Netflix series. They'll acknowledge stuff that happened during Jessica Jones, during the Daredevil season, stuff that will be happening during Iron Fist. So it all kind of bleeds together, but usually when characters start out in their own series, it's very self-contained. but because they're not going to start shooting the Punisher Season 1 until the beginning of next year, they're not going to finish it for at least a year, till at least the tail end of the year. So I would be blown away if they even try to premiere during 2017. I think it's going to be like early 2018 before we see Punisher. But if they do actually announce a release date or give any hints as to when that's going to drop, I'll be sure to post an update. It's just that Defenders is going to be happening before Punisher Season 1 for sure, and Punisher will appear in that. So a lot of what's happening with Punisher during Defenders will also inform what's happening during Punisher Season 1. So there's like a whole bunch of story that we'll see from Punisher that we haven't got yet that'll give us a pretty good idea of what's going to be going on. So just be sure to watch all the Netflix series whenever they drop. So you're asking now, are there any comic book storylines that they're going to be doing during the Netflix series? They could totally do Welcome Back, Frank. That's basically that Manucci storyline that I talked about earlier in the video, where, he basically announces his return to New York City by killing 3 of the top members of that family. And it's just like, hey bitches, it's open season on the Mafia. Punisher's back. The comic book story they did for Punisher during Daredevil Season 2 was kind of like Daredevil versus Punisher. So they also weaved in Trial of the Punisher a little bit. They did a little Punisher Max when he got thrown in prison. So there's a little bits of comic book storylines, but nothing's ever going to be like an exact interpretation of a comic book storyline. There'll be things from comic book storylines, characters, but they're not going to do an exact story from the comics. I know it'd be awesome to see like a Hearts of Darkness crossover with Ghost Rider. Everybody wants to see Ghost Rider in the Netflix series. They're doing Robbie Reyes on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It looks like it's going to be pretty cool, but I totally would not be surprised if Blade or Ghost Rider showed up in the Netflix series eventually. Blade is another character people have been asking about. Wesley Snipes is out of prison, like he's trying to work again. Marvel has the rights to do the character. They could do Blade anytime they want in the movies or in the TV shows. Whenever they can work him in, they'll do it. It's just that they haven't done vampires yet, so you kind of have to explain that vampires exist in this universe before you can do Blade. So I think the other big thing that's holding them back on Blade is also trying to work out a deal with Wesley Snipes. So maybe we'll see Wesley Snipes' Blade come to the Netflix series or in the movie somewhere. I think it's more likely that they would do him on the Netflix series. But let me know in the comments, would you actually want to see Ghost Rider and Blade as a Netflix series, or at least cross over with the other Netflix series, even if they didn't get their own season? I feel like that'd be pretty badass. They could do some really good character development too, because you have 2 hours to develop a character in a movie, but you get almost 13 hours to do it on one of the Netflix series. So I feel like you get a lot better payoff with the Netflix stuff, just because you have more time to spend with those characters. But get hype, and there is a Marvel giveaway going on right now. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber, leave a comment on this video. I'm still giving away Captain America Blu-rays, so I'll announce the winner the next time I post a Marvel video. But we just learned about Kevin Smith's Flash episode. He's shooting it right now, so I'm going to do a video for that. It will be a really awesome Killer Frost deep cut, so that should post in a little while. And just a heads up, if you haven't seen my last couple of videos, YouTube rolled an update. Now you can actually click on the links that I add to the end of videos if you're on your mobile phone. But there are a few bugs that they're still working out. So if you guys do have problems clicking on those links, just let me know in the comments. It should be fine though in the next couple days. While you guys wait for that to post, you can click here for like the last big Luke Cage trailer I just posted. And you can click here to learn all about the new Batsuit in Justice League that Batman's going to be wearing. So thank you so much for watching. Everybody, let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.